The Center for the Study of Violence and Reconciliation says President Cyril Ramaphosa has dealt with the COVID-19 pandemic laudably, showing decisive action and leadership. But they're now calling on the president to show the same leadership in dealing with gender-based violence. And we're joined now on the line. The Skype line didn't quite work by Nomfundo Mogapi from the Center. Nomfundo, a very good afternoon to you. I was saying before we started our conversation earlier that a post had just come through from an independent media vendor about a Western Cape man, 28, arrested after gruesome discovery of murdered mother and daughter. It doesn't seem to be stopping, does it?
It doesn't seem to be stopping, and it has not stopped. Just because we were not reporting on it, it doesn't mean that it was not happening. And this is what we had been saying for the longest time, even when we did our research in 2017, that gender-based violence was becoming a crisis. Actually, we had said, as you rightfully read, that for us it is another pandemic in South Africa that has been exacerbated now by the COVID-19. And the importance of just using the very same sense of agency. As a country, we've seen ourselves being able to send messages that said to people, let us all put masks, and everybody had put in a mask. So it is possible to re-engineer our society so that we begin to see this issue as serious as the current pandemic that we're facing now.
So this morning, President Cyril Ramaphosa released a statement titled President Cyril Ramaphosa condemns surge in murders of women and children, where he says that he's calling on South Africans to end the culture of silence around gender-based violence and report perpetrators to the South African Police Service. But you reckon that he hasn't done as much as he should, especially compared to the kind of effort he's put into the fight against COVID-19?
Look, the fact that we just have launched now the National Strategic Plan for gender-based violence under his leadership, which is going to guide us for the next 10 years, is something that is actually positive. But what we have seen happen during the pandemic is that it's not just the president himself that has been taking leadership. We have seen the ministers, all of them, speaking the same language, saying that the pandemic is an emergency across of the whole country. And that is the kind of leadership that we see. Yes, we can see him speak, we can see him say it, but we need collective leadership across all sectors of government. And we need to hear all the ministers speaking the same language, saying this is an issue, this is a crisis. We're hearing daily updates around what is happening with the pandemic and how we are dealing with it. Can we have that sense of agency where we get daily stats on what is happening in South Africa, where we are highlighting it, where we're talking about it on Twitter? So we have actually learned that it is possible for us as a society to galvanize ourselves once we decide that something is a disaster and something is a pandemic. And perhaps we have not been seeing gender in the same lens and giving it the same level of agency that we have given the pandemic.
Nomfundo, how's the Centre engaging or interrogating the issues of the link between alcohol and the conversations around the alcohol ban and gender-based violence in this time of lockdown?
Yes, I mean, we have been engaging with these issues, and we have said that lockdown has raised another level of crisis for those of us that are fighting against sexual and gender-based violence, because women are now stuck in their homes with the same people that are actually violating them. And what we had found in the past was that when there was no lockdown, when the perpetrators at least went home, went to work or went to other places, the victims were able, or the survivors were able to develop some strategies on how they could be able to escape. So most of these women are stuck with the perpetrators. Now, adding to that, the perpetrators have access to alcohol. They are not allowed to drink in taverns or go out. They are forced to actually come and drink at home. For us, this is a recipe for disaster, because these men who are already violent, who've got huge problems with controlling their anger, who are already feeling powerless because gender is a crime of power. They are already feeling powerless because of the challenges that are related to COVID-19. The state has also shown that levels of anxiety and depression have generally increased in the country. And you've got these people who don't know how to deal with their emotions. And of course, what is it that they do? They run into alcohol as a vehicle to help them deal with the stress. And what does alcohol do? Alcohol impacts the capacity of people to control their agencies, and it therefore exacerbates the problem. We are not saying alcohol is the only problem, because the problems are deeper, and there are men who are violent without drinking alcohol, but alcohol makes it worse.
You've touched on it a bit, the forked tongue of government, where the president says something but ministers do the opposites. Do you have examples for us where you've looked at a situation and you've really been not happy with the kind of messages coming from government at this time in relation to gender-based violence?
Well, for us, it's not as much the contradiction. For us, is the sense of urgency. It's us hearing all the ministers coming up and speaking against gender-based violence and highlighting that it is an emergency. Gender-based violence cannot only just be held in the department that deals with women and children. Gender-based violence needs to be held around those that deals with economy, that deals with local governance, across all the ministers. And I think what we are saying is that when ministers speak, we are not hearing all of them saying, over and above the mechanisms that we are putting in place to fight COVID-19, this is what we are also putting in place to ensure that we are fighting issues that are related to gender-based violence, whether it is in the workplace or is in the homes. So for us, we're really calling on that agency, from the police minister, from the minister of COPTA, from the minister. All the ministers need to be speaking about the importance of addressing gender-based violence and see it as a pandemic.
How are you interacting or talking to the presidency in this regard?
Well, I mean, it's not just only CSVR. We are part of the movement of civil society. What we are happy with is that in the national strategic plan, there is a space to say that civil society will play an important role in monitoring and holding government accountable in terms of how they are actually implementing the strategy. We are trying to also mobilize communities themselves to be able to engage with government and talk about their different experiences and what is happening to them. We've seen civil society go to the street through total shutdown. We've seen women themselves go to the street through total shutdown, saying we need to do something in relation to this. As the sector, we've also been trying to use online media, WhatsApp groups, to really begin to raise awareness around some of these issues. But we do know that the lockdown has also affected most of the NGOs and civil society capacity to be able to function. Most of the community-based organizations don't have the kinds of online platform that some of us might actually have to be able to make our voices stronger. So it is really important, even for our government, to find ways of connecting with the people on the ground so that they can hear. We've got a number of WhatsApp groups where women raise concerns, and that's why I've been saying, even though some of the stories are coming through now in the media, we've been hearing women saying, guys, this person is being killed in this place. This violence is continuing. The violence, unfortunately, has been continuing.
Nomfundo, thank you so much for talking to us. But just to wrap up our conversation, everybody is asking what needs to be done to make this stop. What are the latest insights that you have from your center in terms of the fight against gender-based violence?
Look, I mean, some of the issues have already been raised by the sector in the National Strategic Plan, and I just want to reiterate those. It has been said that it's really important that people who've got a history of gender-based violence and know how to deal with gender-based violence are appointed in public positions and in leadership positions. it is really important that there is responsible and sensitive reporting around gender-based violence. And we commend our media that they are beginning to raise these issues, but we need a sustained way of raising the issues on a daily basis, just like we've done with COVID, have dedicated channels, have dedicated times where we say we are focusing on the state of GBV in South Africa, because we've seen even during COVID-19 the crucial role that the media has done to make sure that South Africans are kept up to date. But also we've been saying that we really need to roll out evidence-based prevention mechanisms and ensure that there is 24 hours, 7 days a week access for care and support to survivors of gender-based violence. We have seen a lot of emergency line coming up during COVID-19 where people can call government and quickly are able to get help. Let us use those very same mechanisms and infrastructure that we have developed for COVID-19 also for gender-based violence.
Thank you so much for talking to us, and we hope you can come back and tell us once you've gotten a response from the presidency.
No, thank you.
Nomfundo, Mogapi there, they're calling on the president to put as much effort into the fight against gender-based violence as government has done in the fight against COVID-19.